Gully, well, let's turn our attentions to the other side of the political divide, and that's Jeremy Corbyn. Ongoing issues over anti-Semitism and his... it's now not just him not cracking down on anti-Semitism in his own party, it's him himself being an anti-Semite. I mean, it's certainly what I consider him to be. I think you can only judge people on what they say and what they do and the company they keep. And I'm sorry, on the basis of all those things, it is very clear to me that anti-Semitism is at the absolute heart of the leadership of the of the Labour Party. Now, Jeremy Corbyn has been criticised now by the former chief rabbi, that's Lord Jonathan Sacks. He has made an extraordinary statement in which he said that what Jeremy Corbyn has said of British Zionists was the most offensive statement made by a senior politician since Enoch Powell's Rivers of Blood speech. And he said that it was his view that to all intents and purposes that Jeremy Corbyn was an anti-Semite who defiles our politics and demeans the country we love. Well, let's talk about this with Stephen Silverman. He's trustee and director at the Campaign Against Anti-Semitism, and he joins us now. Good morning to you, Stephen.
Good morning.
These were incredibly strong words from Lord Sacks, who's known very much. People would know him from Thought for the Day on Radio 4, a very mild-mannered man, and his words have really absolutely ripped through the political establishment. Is it your view that if there is not action taken against Jeremy Corbyn, if he remains as leader of the Labour Party, remains as a potential next Prime Minister of this country, given that he is now viewed by many in the Jewish community and many others like myself who outside the Jewish community as an anti-Semite, that he does effectively defile our politics and demean the country we love?
I don't think that is an unfair assessment of the situation at all. I mean, if you look at what Lord Sacks has actually done, he has voiced fears that are at the centre of every Shabbat dinner table every week. And I think what we have to do is understand this, not just look at what Jeremy Corbyn has done and particularly has been reported as having said of late, but we have to look at the context within which it has taken place. And what we have is a populist figure who has achieved prominence at a time of great political unrest. He has opened a Pandora's box out of which an ancient hatred that I think most of us believed was more or less dead, it has come storming into the light, and we are seeing the same slurs about Jews that have preceded many bouts of persecution over the last couple of years. The Jew as alien, the Jew as disloyal, the Jew as something untrustworthy. And if we were to arrive in a position, hypothetically, where Jeremy Corbyn were to be elected Prime Minister, and we went through a period of tremendous economic unrest, it is not a stretch to see who would be blamed for that with the rhetoric that Jeremy Corbyn has given voice to.
In terms of where we move on from here, I mean, look, the reality is Jeremy Corbyn's not going to resign from leadership of the Labour Party. There's no pressure on him from the membership or others to go. There's a lot of pressure from many Labour MPs who are very unhappy about what was he said. But again, they've been unhappy with him for years. But you could argue that's because they knew the man he was. The National Executive Committee, Labour's ruling body, the NEC, they're going to have a vote next week on whether or not they accept the full definition, the international definition of anti-Semitism. And it's likely that they may well try and diffuse the row by accepting that and trying to move on. Will that move the issue, or will we then move on and say, right, Labour's accepted it, everything's fine, nothing to see here?
I have two responses to that. The first response is that if you look at what is being said about that possible decision, firstly, yes, we'll implement it, but we may add clauses that will enable us still to say certain things. Yes, we'll implement it, but we'll introduce measures that will, punitive measures against people who make what they refer to as vexatious complaints of anti-Semitism. So here it's hard to escape the fact that they seem to be working very hard to ensure that certain people are protected from being facing charges under the definition. But secondly, yes, I mean, that definition needs to be implemented in full because it is the right thing to do. But I'm afraid that under the current leadership, it will not change a thing. The damage is too great to be reparable under Jeremy Corbyn and the people around him.
Would you be afraid if Jeremy Corbyn was elected as Prime Minister of this country?
Yes, I think that's very simple, and I don't believe I'm alone in that. I think the vast majority of Jewish people will be afraid. I mean, we know people have gone in the last year from talking about whether or not they would need to leave the country under a Jeremy Corbyn premiership to actually putting plans in place to do so. And we've seen at least one very prominent lawyer openly talking about that, as he is in that position. This is something that the Jewish community in Britain never thought possible.
And what about people? What about people who aren't Jewish themselves? Remember, the Jewish community, 250,000 people in this country, are often very geographically centred, North London, Manchester. There are many people listening, the vast majority of people listening, not Jewish themselves. Should they be afraid?
Well, anti-Semitism of this nature is a societal sickness. And there's an old saying, which is, what begins with the Jews doesn't end with the Jews. It's a sign of something very sick and very deeply rooted. There are so many people who are not Jewish who are standing with us at this time. They recognize the problem. They understand that not only is it unfair and deeply dangerous to a minority community in this country, but it represents a huge threat to society as a whole. I think it's very, very difficult to overstate the perilous position we are actually in and would be in the event of a Corbyn premiership.
Stephen Silverman, thank you very much for joining us, Trustee and Director at the Campaign Against Anti-Semitism. The time is coming up to 8:21. This is Talk Radio.